As you know, as president, it's always my pleasure to open this evening of this really remarkable series, Arts Meets Science, which is organized by Violeta Dinescu this evening with you, Dušan, and the speeches and the discussions are moderated this evening by Andrew Balas and Peter Hermann. Now, the first talk is given by our new Vice President, Verica Trstenjak. She is, as you perhaps know, a professor of European law, and the talk is dedicated to AI and law. And as you perhaps know, I'm engaged in AI, I think, since over 4 decades, and therefore I have a good remembrance of the beginning when in the time of so-called symbolic AI, people tried to translate, to transform legal texts into the formalism of symbolic logic, formal logic. And that was the time of so-called symbolic AI. And the results were very poor, because also of the very slow computers. And that nowadays completely changed. The approach is nowadays no longer by logic, but by statistical algorithms, machine learning, generative AI, and very, very powerful machines. And therefore, these amazing results, even in simulating arguments of lawyers. And on the one side, the lawyers are under pressure with their deadlines to give decisions, and but on the other side, the question arises: how far are these machine learning, are able to really understand what is going on in a legal text? Now, more about that later on. The second talk is dedicated to a long-term topic in our academy. Since our presidency in 2020, we were engaged in a working group which was engaged in STEM. STEM means science, technology, engineering, mathematical education, but together, typical for our profile, together with the arts and with culture. And therefore, sometimes it is usual in our academy to call it the STEM-MAC or STEM-MAC approach. Now, anyway, this approach has deep roots, you know, in the beginning of modern time, in the time of Renaissance. People get an insight that our human creativity is not separated into engineering and natural science on the one side, and on the other side, the arts. But the vision of Leonardo da Vinci is the integration of both. And therefore, I'm very eager to learn more about that. And we will hear that in the next talk. And thank you so much for your attention, and I wish us all an exciting discussion.
Klaus, thank you very much for a very nice introduction, as usually. And now I'll ask everybody to mute except the speakers, so that you don't get any disturbances anymore, please. Thank you. And Andrew, please introduce the first speaker. Professor Verica Trstenjak.
Sure, very, very happy to hear that. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you.
Very good. Well, our first speaker is Verica Trstenjak, and thank you very much. It's a great privilege to introduce you as one of Europe's most distinguished scholars in European Union law, renowned for her contributions to the development of legal integration, human rights, rule of law within the European legal order. She served as Advocate General at the Court of Justice of the European Union from 2006 to 2012, Her opinions helped shape important areas of European law and regulation. And Professor Trstenjak has also held leading academic positions at several European universities, research institutions, combining rigorous scholarship with extensive practical experience in international and European legal affairs. Her work spans European constitutional law, consumer protection, judicial cooperation, fundamental rights, and she is widely respected for her ability to bridge legal theory and institutional practice with great communication skills. Throughout her career, she has been an active voice in promoting European cooperation, legal harmonization, and democratic values across the continent. And I am very proud to underscore that she currently serves as the vice president of our academy, the European Academy of Sciences and Arts. So it is a great honor to welcome Professor Verica Trstenjak today. And please join me in giving her a warm welcome and very interesting presentation that we are looking forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this nice presentation. Now I will try to share my PowerPoint. I'm going to speak about artificial intelligence, ethics, and human rights, but also because of the development in the society, in the European society, I'm going to mention also 2 or 3 cases of the European Court of Justice. Why? Because artificial intelligence, this area, it's in a way new because there are so many legal problems, not only legal, there are many problems, but we don't have so many answers. So that I will try to answer also, to give you answer because we, on some questions, because we have already some judgments. I would like to start with this question. What is the most important factor for the AI in the future? It's this technology, it's this law, fundamental rights, or ethics. So that you know. Okay, so it's difficult if others are speaking. Okay, so that you can answer for yourself, it's this technology, the law, fundamental rights, ethics, you know, all factors are important, but the most important we are going maybe to have answer at the end of the lecture, what is the most important. Now, just to start, to warm up, or how to say, a question for you. Have you used already today artificial intelligence, some algorithms? For example, I think that, because not to discuss with you, but maybe you have used this already for wake up this morning, or maybe when you check the weather, how to say, weather predictions, or maybe traffic predictions, how to reach the, if you wanted to visit it, if you wanted to visit something, and so on, so that, or maybe you made a reservation for some tickets, for opera, for flights tickets, and so on. So that we use actually artificial intelligence, I would say, not every minute, but every hour at least. I don't know. It's possible to how to say, to close, or to say to put off Mr. Gleiter.
I think the problem is that nobody from us is as a host.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Host is
I
not
think
logged
Doris,
in. Yeah,
we are not
He's
host.
speaking all the time.
Barry,
Okay, no, anyway.
Barry, who is making this? Is Doris? Maybe
Who
she
is the
can turn
host?
off. I have no access.
Yeah, because now it's automatic recording, you know, so none of us are host here, so therefore we cannot
That's
Who is the
really
host?
But there should be host who can do this. Yeah, I
Can you
cannot.
just switch him off? Take him off the.
Yeah, the host could do this. Okay, anyway, I will try to speak anyways now. Now to start also with one question to think about the problems with the artificial intelligence. If artificial intelligence makes decisions about you, who will protect your fundamental rights? Or, for example, just for easy question, does your mobile phone know you better than your friends? then is this a problem for your privacy? You know, if your mobile phone, if has all the informations about you, where is then your privacy, and can control your mobile phone? And very important, in the last years already, would you trust an artificial intelligence algorithm to make decision about your loan, for example, credit loans, about insurance, about your job applications, about medicaments, and so on? So this is all in all these areas we use already the artificial intelligence. So that this was introduction. I will now just mention new challenges and also problems. Then I will speak about artificial intelligence law and fundamental rights, I think, in Europe, and then about the judgments of the Court of Justice, and then also the last, as a lawyer, I very often speak about this, how to say, about this development, if the robots is going to be a judge. But there, you know, I started this many years ago, but now I have more and more informations, and I develop the answers on this. So new problems in the artificial intelligence. It's not only ChatGPT, but we have to know that human rights is a huge problem for this area. Then, for example, we will see the case with credit scoring. And also, for example, the question, can a robot has a citizenship? No. Assume because many of you are from the area of artificial intelligence, you know that in Saudi Arabia, the robot Sophia has a citizenship of Saudi Arabia, and also that this robot, you can find hundreds of YouTube's interviews with this woman, Sophia robot. He actually has so many human rights, actually in a way more than women in Saudi Arabia. And also the next, one of the next questions concerning the robot, this woman Sophia, it's if a robot can adopt a child, for example. Just to mention that this information about robot is very old. This is from 2017, as you can see. And also this one, Sophia the robot wants a baby and says family is really important. She would like to adopt a baby. A child, I think a child as a human being. There was a lot of criticism also to speak about this. I have asked also ChatGPT, I have asked artificial intelligence, if I may say so, if a robot can adopt a child. What do you think? What was the answer? Now it's maybe difficult to. I see only a few faces. What was the answer? Yes or not? Oh, yeah. I was very happy that the answer was negative. You see, can a robot adopt a child? And the answer of ChatGPT, it was last year or 2 years ago. The answer was no. A robot cannot adopt a child because only human being can adopt a child. But very important here is, as you know, ChatGPT is better and better every day. Also, I criticize him, and he is then always better. He or she, I don't know, it's he or she. And then, because for me it was important that in this answer there are not only legal limitations about this, but also you see emotional and psychological needs of the child. But also for me, as a lawyer who is working on the area of ethics, it was very important that the ChatGPT mentions also ethical considerations. This is very, very important, so that the artificial, ChatGPT doesn't use only or doesn't mention only legal problems, but also ethical problems. Or this with i.e. artificial intelligence and digital immortality, that this digital person can actually, take over your character, your emotions, everything. And then if your grandchildren are going to speak with this, your digital double, or if they will ask you how it was when somebody died and so on, this digital person starts to cry and so on. So that it's really something. Why I speak about this? I think that you are familiar with this development, but I speak about this because I think this is also one of the areas where we need law. we need legal acts in this area to how to say, to make borders for this development. You cannot see here, even not physically, who is the real one and who is the digital, and also here, and here you can see then that this one is digital. And then can your robot be your boss? This is also from 2014. As you know, in China, there are many robots who are boss. People who are in favor of this, they say it's better because they don't ask for the salary, for the higher salary. They don't ask for holidays and so on. So that this is all development. And then you know that we have one minister, artificial intelligence minister in Albania. I'm very skeptical about this because where is the responsibility? What about democracy? In democracy, we have human beings too, for the election of the politicians and so on. Then problems with ChatGPT, new problems about liability, for example, for copyrights infringement, for data protection of infringements. For example, can an artist receive a compensation, discrimination, but also in the area of discrimination, we have some developments, but still, as you know, the important is the basis for databases which are used for the answers. And now I have mentioned now some problems, and now in this second part and the next two parts, I will try to show you that we need legal acts and that we need the courts to decide when we have problems. First of all, at the EU level, we have EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. This is new legal act in force since 2009. And this is this charter you see here of fundamental rights of the EU. This is like European Constitution. We don't call it Constitution, but in the reality, it's Constitution, European Constitution for Human Rights. For students, I have always such small, this is very small booklet with our human rights. I always bring this for students. And here you can see all here it's still in German. Article 8, for example, data protection. Article 21, non-discrimination. Article 16, for example, important for enterprises, freedom to conduct business, and so on. So that this is actually very, very important. This is the highest. This is like constitution. I call this small book with big rights, really very, very important legal acts, as I said, in force since 2009, and very important also for the artificial intelligence. For example, for human beings, by privacy, it's important. It's here in this small booklet. Then data protection, non-discrimination, rights to information, and so on. But this charter or fundamental rights are not important only for human beings, but also for companies, also Google, Meta, Apple, they say we have also fundamental rights. Now, we don't speak about human rights, but you can use both human rights, but more, the contemporary terminology, it's fundamental rights, because it's not only typical human rights, but also modern, like digital rights or politician rights and so on. And Google, Meta, Apple, and so on, they say, but we have property rights. You can, with the limitations, you can violate our property rights or freedom to conduct business. Meta, or they always say there are so many cases at the Court of Justice because of the limitations for Meta, for example, and Apple. They always say freedom to conduct business. You cannot violate our freedom to conduct business. Or they say we have we have right to information, because right to information doesn't mean only that you can get the information, but means also that you can deliver the information. And Google always say in all the cases, no, this is our right to deliver the information. If you search something, then you will get the information from Google. And these are then also the fundamental rights, very, very important for the artificial intelligence. So the question is, how many legal acts do we need? there is a lot of critics for Europe that we have too many legal acts in all areas and also in the area of artificial intelligence. And you know, there is this sentence, you can hear this sentence on all conferences. United States, they innovate and Europe regulates, you know. And then it's always this example, you know, with the plastic bottles, that because it is now the rule in Europe that it's how to say, fix on the bottle. And the United States, they regulates in different, they innovate in different areas. So that how many legal acts, you know, this is difficult to say, but we have to get this answer from the practice. When we see that, then we have problems. I have mentioned some of them. For example, ChatGPT, we have seen before, there are problems with copyright, with data protection, and so on. So that this means that we need legal acts. And which legal acts do we have? I will not speak about the legal acts, but about some solutions already. We have EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, as I said. Then we have GDPR. This is the most important for data protection. This means the General Data Protection Regulation. It's very important. It's older. It's in force since 2018. And then we have new legal acts, actually, Artificial Intelligence Act, a new one, Digital Market Act, Digital Services Act, Data Act, and many others. I personally, I am very pro-European, but anyway, I am also with a lot of criticism concerning all these legal acts, because there is not, we don't have enough harmonization of between these legal acts. So that also for the companies, for example, for the banks, for the insurance companies, it's very difficult to find a solution, because you have to check at first GDPR, then you have to check in Data Act, then you have to check also in the Artificial Intelligence Act. And so that European Commission now try to, to improve this. Maybe you have heard about Omnibus, new proposal, also for Omnibus in the area of artificial intelligence. We have Omnibus also for the area of climate change. And this will be better, but I have spoken with people from the practice. They see that also this new, the proposal of the Commission to harmonize this, it's not really better than the existing legal framework. So this is, now we have, as I said, many legal acts, we have new legal acts, and now how to solve the problems when the problem is already here. I am going to mention two cases when the Court of Justice decided already. Because of the time is limited today, I could mention also more, but I have selected two cases. And this is, as you see, artificial intelligence and impact of the Court of Justice of the EU. This abbreviation I will use on the next pages for the Court of Justice of the EU. This is the highest court of the EU. This is actually the Constitutional and Supreme Court of the European Union. The judgment of this court are obligatory in all EU member states. This means in 27 member states and for 450 million Union citizens. So that it's very important. I was Advocate General at this court. I studied as a judge and I was Advocate General. It's really important because the judgments are obligatory in all member states. Even if the case is from Germany or from Austria, as we will see now in the next two cases, the judgment is obligatory in all member states. First case, I'm sorry. Water. The first case, the name of the first case is case, as you can see, Land Hessen or Schufa, better. It's always the number of the case. You would like to see the number. And this case concerning the topic, it's about, it's, oh, sorry. Some problem here with, sorry. It's about automated processing and about automated decisions. In this area, we have already the legal rule in Europe, and this is the rule is in GDPR, in General Data Protection Regulation. This you see here, legal framework. In the Article 82 of the GDPR, of the new General Data Protection Regulation, there is article about automated decision making. And in Europe, automated decisions, or automated individual decision making decisions, so to say, are not binding. You see here, the data subject shall have the right not to be subject to a decision which based solely on automated processing, so that such automated decisions are not binding for us, for the people, for the persons. What does this mean? In this case, Schufa Holding, this German case, there was Schufa is, maybe if you are from Germany, I'm sure you are familiar with Schufa, because when I speak with students, they all say have very negative, attitude concerning this Schufa. And this is a private company in Germany, and there is responsible for credit scoring, for credit reports to the banks. And also in this case, Schufa, there was a case when the Schufa prepared such scoring concerning the credit loans, but the consumer was not, happy with this scoring, and went to the court and said, no, but Schufa cannot make this as automated decision. It is necessary that also somebody from the bank officials is included in this, in the final decision. So that if you are going to speak with the banks, because I'm also partly active in banking sector, now I'm by the European Central Bank, but in the past I was by one of the private banks. The banks say, yeah, but there is no difference if this is automated decision, because also if some human being is going to decide this could also be a discrimination and so on. But the problem is that such, automated decisions, you don't know exactly how it was decided. There are still, because of the new area, possibilities of discrimination. For example, there will be similar situation for the next, by the next case. Because, for example, this credit scoring, what does this mean? Because you are old, for example, you can get from 1 to 100 points for every issue. And for example, because you are old, you will get only 10 points, and somebody who is young, 100 points. If you are a woman, you will get 10 points, men will get 100 points. If you live, in the center of the city, for example, Vienna, you will get 100 points. If you live in one small village, you will get 1 point, and so on. So that there are so many problems for this scoring, so that already the European legislator, not only the court, already the legislator, as I mentioned before, decided that such automated decisions in the EU are not binding. And then the case came from the European Court of Justice, because in Germany, the banks used this scoring for the credits, to get, if somebody wanted to get a credit, to get a loan, credit contract with the bank. And the case started in Germany, and according to this special procedure, the German court then sent a question to Luxembourg, to the European Court of Justice. And the European Court of Justice decided that such scoring, it's not, it's not binding for the consumers, because of the article, this article 82 of the GDPR. And the court decided, as you can see here, the General Data Protection Regulations opposes the two processing practices by Credit Information Agency. This first practice was scoring, and the second one was the problem with this prolonged retention, because they also, this Schufa Holding, this agency, also had a very, very long access to the data, to the personal data of the clients. So that this was the second problem. So that here is already decision. Banks cannot use these automated decisions, even if technically it is possible. So that there was in all news you it was published in the EU top court's ruling spells trouble for scoring algorithms and so on and so on. So this was the first case concerning credit scoring, for if you would like to have, if you have relations with the banks. And the second, very similar case actually, but here is one step further, how to say. It's very often by the case law of the European Court of Justice, as we have like basic case. It was this Schufa holding, and then, you know, there are new problems, new legal questions, and then the court has to answer the next step, and the next step. In this case, you see also the number. It's also GDPR, also General Data Protection Regulation. And there was a problem with, this is the number of the case. This is also one similar agency in Austria, also for scoring and such automatic to prepare scoring for clients. And there was a consumer, and this consumer wanted to sign an agreement for a mobile phone for 10 euro per month. So that we know already the legal basis, the such automatic, if we go back, such automated decisions are not binding for a client. And this consumer, one consumer, not this, in Austria, it was in Austria case, and the mobile telephone operator refused such a contract to consumer for 10 euro per month on the ground that her credit, it was a woman, her credit standing was not sufficient, were insufficient. And where was the problem? The problem was actually in the, in the practice of the operator, because the operator used for, or got the answer for this decision also from this agency Dun and Bradstreet in Austria, and also this agency made such automated decision with scoring, and also use different factors. You know, we don't know your age, your employment, if you are alone, if you have children, and so on. And this consumer was not happy with this decision and asked the operator about the reasons. Who rejected, who prepared this scoring, and why it was rejected. So that the court, in this case, the European Court, had to answer if we as consumers, if we have a right to get factors for such a decision. This means if we have a right to get, actually the structure of the algorithms, how this decision was taken. I think this is really very, very important. It's means a lot. It means a new obligation for the here, for example, in this case for the operators, but this will be the similar answer then for insurance companies also, because there is a similar situation. And the court decided, as you can see, it's European Court of Justice. This is like press release decision 27 February 2025. Automated credit assessment. The data subject is entitled to an explanation as to how the decision was taken in respect of him or her. Very, very important decision. And also the second sentence, the explanation provided must enable the data subject to understand this, you know. They have to explain you why, and so that you can understand this decision. And also as consumer, it's necessary that you have this possibility to challenge the automated decision. So that this is now already the decision, very, very important. And as I said before, I have decided to speak only about two decisions, both in this area of automated decision makings. Then this is now just to mention that we have already new cases at the Court of Justice concerning the artificial intelligence, more future-oriented, if I may say so. This is already about first one. It's already about new Artificial Intelligence Act. You know, it's very important legal act. This question is from Bulgaria, and it's concerning the Interpretation of Artificial Intelligence Act, and it's also, in a way, it's similar as the two former decisions concerning the what are our rights concerning the individual decision makings, but on the basis on the second legal act. So that I said before that we have many legal acts and they are not harmonized, but this question, it's similar to the case which we had, but it's a new legal act, this IA act. Maybe for non-lawyers it's not so important, for us lawyers is. But so that maybe this case is more, interesting for you. It's in this case we don't have a decision, we don't have a judgment. We wait for the decision. Judgment will be maybe at the end of this year. And in this case, we also don't have a judgment, but the hearing was already at the Court of Justice. The hearing at the Court of Justice was in March this year. This case, the name of the case is like Company versus Google. Versus Google, it's always Ireland, because the seat of, not always, but in many cases, because the seat of Google in Europe is in Ireland. And cases from Hungary, as I said. And the problem in this case, very, very important, are copyrights. First case concerning the large language models. This means also ChatGPT. In this case, it's Google Gemini. And in the connection with the copyright, the old copyright directive. And in this case, as you can see, hearing was on the 10th of March this year, so that the judgment will be pronounced, I think, maybe October, November, because of the first Advocate General has to give an opinion, and then is the judgment. The Advocate General will give an opinion. I have checked, I think it's first week of September. And then will be judgment after the opinion of Advocate General. And in this case, the court has to decide in the connection with the large language models is if large language models, if this what they are doing, they are, maybe if we are all scientists, sometimes when you read the answer, you see, but these are my words, these are my sentences. So that the question in this case is if this is a reproduction, but they are doing large language models. If this is reproduction, we call this reproduction of the text, then it's copyright protection. And also, if this what they are large language models, this access, your answers, what you get, if this what they are offering you, if this is communication to the public, if there these two criteria, that there is a reproduction and there is communication to the public, then it's also copyright. So that the court has to decide this. It's very, very important case, and we will have answer then until the end of this year. So that just to mention you that the development not only in the legal act but also in the case law of the court, of the highest court. And now just few sentences about this. Where is then the future? I always speak about these judges. Do we have a right to judge a human being, or in the future we will have all judges as robots? This is when I was a judge of the European Court. This is my photo. So that do we have a right to a natural judge, how to say the judge as human being? We will have artificial intelligence, different algorithms. They help already a lot now to the judges. Especially, they can also answer, I think, in some cases, if we have only technical questions. But if we have questions, for example, what is proportional, what is fair, and so on, then I think this is not possible, that also not in the future, that artificial intelligence is going to answer on this. And we can take as an example a divorce. If we speak about the divorce, the artificial intelligence can decide about, I would say, legal technical questions. Two persons don't like to live together, and this is very, technical. This is also the artificial intelligence can decide about the divorce. But if there is also a child, if the couple has a child, then decision by who will be responsible for the child in the future, it's not so easy, because then it's not important only how big is flat, how high is the salary, but also, this emotional approach, your empathy, and so on. So that this is something, but I think it's not possible that the artificial intelligence is going to decide. So that I asked ChatGPT also about this, how to solve such problems. And I ask you, give me a list with 10 qualities of a good mom. And you see, the ChatGPT answer that 10 qualities for a good mother are different. Love, patience, and so on. And also, for example, I just choose this empathy. How the artificial intelligence will decide about this if somebody has empathy. And then I ask also, you see, give me a list of 10 qualities of a good father. And I don't know why, but for good fathers, the answers are longer. Somebody said, yeah, this is because for men, you have always to make all explanations. Anyway, you see, empathy here is on the 4th place. Here is empathy on the 8th position. So that you see this, how difficult it is to decide. Also for the artificial intelligence, also to decide, then qualities are not the same. So that who will be responsible for the child in the future? I think this is something you have to decide. This not only very technical, but you have to, as a human being, also with your emotions, what is empathy to decide fairly and so on. So that this is very important. And this is what I always then make us in all actually lectures about artificial intelligence for lawyers. We can see this problem of artificial intelligence and these technical decisions by judgment of Solomon. You are familiar with this story from Bible, and how a robot can resolve such Solomon test. Two mothers, and they both said that they are mother of one child, and the King Solomon had to decide, and he said that he suggested to it's difficult to say this, to cut the baby into pieces. And then, as you know, the real mother said, no, don't do this. And the non-real mother said, yes, you can do this. But why is this important? Maybe also artificial intelligence would do this technical. But you see, this is important then for us, that just to show you that we need human beings for the decisions which are important for people. We consider this approach to justice as an example of an impartial judge displaying wisdom. This is this wisdom which we need in making rulings. So to conclude, this is last 2 pages now. Very important very important are fundamental rights and also legal acts, but not to ever overregulate the area. Important influence of the Court of Justice of the EU, and also we know that we not need trustworthy artificial intelligence. So to conclude, how many legal acts do we need, and who will control whom? It's this going to be, I have this also here. It's the artificial, I have always this small robot with me. It's the robot, it's artificial intelligence going to control the law. This is this photo. Then the law will be not important, or it will be like vice versa, the big paragraph. The law and the courts also, they will control the artificial intelligence. So at the moment, at this level of the development, I am more for the second proposal, and I hope this will be also, how to say, in the connection with this last sentence, the human spirit must prevail over technology. But it's not my sentence, but what already Albert Einstein said. So that I hope really that this will be also our motto for the future, not also our motto, but also of the developers of the artificial intelligence. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Next time we'll have to fix the problem with interference. Before Doris was taking care and she could have access, and it seems that Barry does not have an access. So I'm apologizing for disturbances that you had and everybody else. with glider interference. Now I'm asking Peter to introduce the new speaker, and we are looking forward to the next talk. Martin.
Yes, thanks. Just briefly introducing Martin. I know him from another project under heading Understanding the World with Different Means while being guided by asking, analyzing, observing, and creating. And then Martin came up and is actually a bridge. It's not just about understanding, but it is making understood. And I think the title actually of his presentation introduces him in the best way, Crossing the Great Divide. What can arts offer science and science education? We are always or mostly talking about science and arts and not about the connection really. On the one hand, what they have in common and how they can contribute to each other. Martin's main research interest is learning in primary and secondary science, biology education, museums and informal learning, teacher education and professional development of teachers, discussions and critical thinking, argumentation in science, and the uses of arts, including drama and tech and teach science. So I think this is a grasp really. I don't want to go through all the positions and merits he gained over his life, now being emeritus and honorary fellow in the Department of Education, University of New York. I think what is really important, the core of everything he did up to now, is combining, never being on one side or the other, but contributing to make whatever science and arts is relevant for practical use. I hope you are happy with this short presentation, Martin. If you are interested, you can go through the link which had been sent with the different positions he held. Of course, they are important, but the core of everything is this bridge building, arts and science in the narrow sense of science, natural science, but as well social science. So Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you also to Violeta for inviting me to this very auspicious colloquium series. I just try and share my screen now. I think that's the one. Okay, so I've titled this Crossing the Great Divide, What Can the Arts Offer Science and Science Education? In a way, I think I'd like to say that the Great Divide is artificial. For example, we're probably sitting somewhere where we're using a computer or a phone, or we're sitting in our office, and the clothes that we're wearing. All the things around us really are produced by a very integrated world. I mean, scientists had to research the materials that we use to make these things. Technologists had a hand in, and engineers in designing the processes to make them. But it's arts and designers who made these things into objects that we would want to purchase and that are attractive to us. So we live in a very integrated world, and yet in education, we've split all these things up to the extent that people are really trying to learn in silos that are sometimes counterproductive to each other. So my talk is about that, and it's also about the kind of relationships between science and the arts and science in society and economically as well. And I thought I'd actually start by looking at this photograph, at this lovely painting.
Excuse me, Dr. Braund, excuse me. We see you and the slide, so that makes the slide very small. At least I see it. We see you together with the slide.
Right. How do I do this then? If I can...
The slides don't show very clearly, that's why I'm saying.
Side by side or as the content only? So
yeah.
Content
maybe. Only. Okay. Yeah. Now that's okay. Now? That's much better. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much indeed for that. And you can still see that okay now.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know whether you're familiar with Georges Seurat. It's one of my favorite artists, really. And this one is a painting called Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte. And I think it's the reason I've used it in my title slide for this talk is because Seurat was as much a physicist as he was an artist. Around about the end of the 19th century, he had a very short life, actually died tragically at the age of 31. But a lot of his work was concerned with the human perception of color. And in his studio, he had light wheels, he had projectors, he had spectral machines to combine light in different ways, and lots of different ways of combining colors of paints. And he actually came up with a color theory. And his color theory was that if you combine certain colors together, each of them were perceived by the eye in a much more dramatic way. So blue with orange, for example, and yellow with mauve or purples, and red and green. And actually that color theory is used in a lot of design today, and even in horticulture and gardening. So Seurat was interested in the physics of light and color, and it influenced his art to a large extent. And we talked in the introduction about the other examples as well. So I'd like to look at three themes for science and its relationship to the arts. I'd like to look at how that affects STEM education, STEAM, and I'd like to look at how using the arts in science teaching with some examples, and a special role for drama, because I've spent some time on that. And I also want to look at a model for how the whole of STEM education might evolve in the future. Okay, here's another painting. Can you see that one? I think you'll probably recognize the artist. It's Pablo Picasso's Le Guitariste, painted in 1910, became available to the public to see in an exhibition in Paris. And if you look at this next to it, this is Niels Bohr's model of the atom, his mathematical reasoning for showing a very different view of particles, in particular the atom. Now you'd look at these two things and you'd think, what on earth has Picasso's cubism got to do with Bohr and his work? Well, it's very interesting, this, because Bohr talks in his memoirs about being stuck with the planetary model where electrons moved around a nucleus in the atom, and they didn't really change. It was not a dynamic model. And Bohr looked at Picasso's work and thought, I don't really see the guitarist in there. I need to look at this from different perspectives, and I need to look at it in almost three-dimensionally, from different aspects, in different light, and look at it over and over again. And I see now that it only makes sense when you look at what Cubism is trying to do is represent things in a number of interacting planes. And so what Bohr then thought of is that actually the electrons in the atom model don't go just around like a planetary system. They shift, they move, and they behave as waves, and they emit energy when they move around as well. And this was fundamental in science, really. It changed the whole of science into looking towards what was called quantum physics, still a guiding principle in physics. So along with Einstein's relativity, Bohr's model of quantum physics was fundamental. Now, I'm not saying that Bohr wouldn't have come up with his model if it wasn't for Picasso, but what's happening here is that it's not just a question of deduction, it's artistically creative imagination which is making these shifts possible. And another Nobel laureate in physics, Max Planck, also recognized this much later. So that's my first theme, really, is that creativity is a way of expanding scientific and technological and engineering and mathematics thinking. So we think of critical thinking underpinning the empirical base of science because it's vertically operated, it's linear, it underpins the decisions and logic for complex problems. And it's important to evaluate assertions by weighing the evidence from one side of a claim to another and testing out competing claims to arrive at what are called validated truths. And another, Diana Kuhn, actually, in the States, and myself with my collaborator, Fred Lubin, have written about this extensively in terms of argumentation theory. But the other side is that creative thinking, which we associate with the arts, is horizontal, lateral. It's very associative and quite subjective. When we look at works of art, we are using a subjective reaction, an emotional reaction to them as well. And it's divergent, but it does actually map out the terrain of surrounding claims. So it actually has a relationship to this more vertically operated linear thinking. So critical thinking in scientific domains also needs imagination of potential arguments to counter the assertions that are being made. So critical thinking, in a way, needs a little creativity on the side. And what it does is it provides the cognitive space for scientific thinking to work in completely new directions sometimes. And another Kuhn, Thomas Kuhn, this time earlier in the 20th century, came up with the idea of scientific revolutions, that science sometimes has great leaps forward, like through Einstein and Bohr that we've looked at. And he called these paradigm shifts. And this is still happening in modern science and technology today. Now, my second theme of how I see science and the arts linking together, relating to each other, is about how the brain works. Now, in the past, and I think we're looking really at the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, it was assumed, and there was evidence from brain injury and from physiology and medical science, that there are hemispheres in the brain which deal with certain kinds of cognitive processes. And it was said that the left brain functions are about analysis, logic, language, reasoning, and therefore science and mathematics, writing also associated here with number skills and right-hand control. And there was some sort of physiological, neurological evidence for this. And on the right side of the brain, the other side of the hemispheres, were art awareness, creativity, imagination, the things that we would associate with the arts, really. But modern neurophysiology actually disputes this. And there are far more cross connections between the two hemispheres, so that these things are not actually working in separation from each other. They are far more integrated than was originally thought. And when we got what's called functional MRI scanning of the brain, we were able to see brain activity. And so, for example, here we have the brain at rest, and you can see the brighter colors, the oranges and the yellow part of it, sorry, back to that, is really the brain at rest. And when we stimulate the person by listening to music or appreciating music, listening to something, then we can see activity in both hemispheres is fired up. There's far more synaptial connections being fired up, electrical activity in the brain. And we've seen this in research listening to music, in terms of dance, and in terms of drama, being actively engaged in drama, or listening to a play or watching a play. And there's other examples as well. And this has been used fundamental in all sorts of parts of education and in the treatment as well of psychological disorders. So there's some people that it's interesting to note. We mentioned Leonardo da Vinci at the beginning of this colloquium today, but there's also Einstein, who was a very accomplished musician. In fact, it's said that he could master some works of Mozart on the violin that other concert violinists couldn't even get to really at the level. And if he hadn't been a successful physicist, would probably have gone on to be a concert violinist. And Richard Feynman, another Nobel laureate in physics, who is playing the bongos there, but his main instrument was the clarinet, in fact, a very accomplished jazz musician. And it's interesting that there's been some research on this in the Journal of Physiology, Psychology and Science and Technology by Bernstein and his collaborators, who looked at laureates in all subjects and in the general population at large, and finds that science laureates and academicians are between twice and 7 times more likely to have some specific skill in painting, poetry, music, than others in other academic areas or the population at large. So there seems to be a link between successful science and the arts. And it does work the other way around as well. This is a picture of Hedy Lamarr, who was a very popular film actress in the 1940s and 50s. And she actually came up with early techniques for what's called spread spectrum communications and frequency hopping. Now, we're all using Wi-Fi and we're using our connections today and we're using our mobile phones. Well, let me tell you, without Hedy Lamarr, we probably wouldn't have progressed to those technologies. So, you know, your mobile phone and your Wi-Fi are down to an actress. Quite incredible, really, isn't it? And then Goethe, we all know, was also a physicist, and he was interested in the chemistry of colors as well. So he had, it's not just a hobby. No, he actually published work on this as well. So that was my second theme, really, about cognition and how it works both ways. But there's also art and science collaboration, which is technological and of economic advantage. Now, this is the Crick Institute in King's Cross. Every time I catch a train from York, it ends up in London at King's Cross. And there's a huge development here called the Knowledge Quarter. And this is billions of pounds have been spent on this. Now, people don't spend this kind of money unless there's a payoff. And so this is called the Knowledge Quarter. It occupies a part of London called Bloomsbury. And it's a partnership of 35 academic, cultural, research and scientific and media organizations. So the Crick Institute is Europe's largest bioscience laboratory, but it also has collaborations between nanophysics, and it has collaborations with the British Library in book conservation. It has collaborations with St. Martin's in design. And another example of this collaboration is at UCLA in the States. Now, UCLA has, University of California, Los Angeles, has built a Center for the Arts and Sciences. And this was a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. And the payoff, according to the co-director, he put it like this: what's interesting is when cross-disciplinary collaborations radically alter the expressive possibilities available to artists and storytellers. So that's a payoff for the artists, but whether professional from the public, and at the same time, it opens up new areas of exploration for the scientists and engineers. So that kind of collaboration opens up new possibilities for both sets of people. Here's a couple of examples. This is at St. Martin's College in London, working on dresses, which when you move and swirl around, this is from the London Fashion Show, they light up and change color because they've got high intensity LEDs sewn into the fabric. So that's a collaboration between nanotechnologists and fabric designers. I like this one. This is a dress made out of the sludge that's left after the fermentation processes to make wine. I don't think you can drink this, but it's quite an interesting example of recycling. So the dress is actually made out of recycled wine sludge. But in both these examples, I think the most important point is that there's a knowledge capital in art, which has been increased by taking really the knowledge capital of science. It can work the other way. So this is a photograph, or it's a photo still from a film called Interstellar. This is Christopher Nolan's film. I can't remember when it came out. It's about 10, 15 years ago. And he's, by the way, the director of Oppenheimer, which won the Oscar a couple of years ago. He wanted to show a picture of black hole, but nobody knew what black hole looked like. So he got hold of the most renowned theoretical physicist, Kip Thorne, and he asked him if he could work out what it might look like from the equations. So he invited Chris Nolan over to his laboratory, and he had chalkboards all the way around this huge laboratory covered in equations. I mean, basically, you know, hundreds of mathematical equations. He said, well, that's it. That's what might help us do a black hole. So Nolan said, well, really understand this, but if we feed this into a massive series of interconnected computers, we might come up with some sort of an image. And that's what happened. Now, the interesting thing is that about 5 years later, the second version of the Hubble telescope actually was able to come up with a photograph of a black hole. And guess what? It looked exactly like this. So what you've got here is that the knowledge capital of art is also helping from the computerization, and Nolan's filmmaking was able to increase the knowledge capital of science. And several scientific papers actually came out to say this is now what we think the black hole will look like from our predictions. So I want to turn now, so those were the three themes to look at how arts relates to science. But I want to look at how arts might help to re-envision STEM education. We've had a problem really in many countries that STEM education has actually failed to interest enough pupils to want to go on to carry on to learn science, and therefore we've got a kind of underrepresentation, particularly amongst women, in science and technology. So we're looking for ways to try and improve STEM education. Oh, sorry. Wrong way. So I want to look at this at three levels. There's a macro level, which is looking at curriculum change, a meso level, which is looking at changes in topics, courses that are taught, and a micro level, which is what goes on in classrooms. And I'll look at towards a STEAM curriculum, that's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and interdisciplinary collaboration. And it also is about establishing a core of science and arts for all ages, but I'm not going to go into the policy side of that. And at the meso level, I've worked on schemes which are Salters, Nuffield, Horner's in biology, physics, and chemistry. And in Germany, I think there's was, and I don't know whether it's still going, but biophysics and chemie, what's called in context. So they're basically looking at contexts. And so there might be a way of looking at art STEM examples in the context of learning those subjects. And at the micro level, we're using art methods to try and teach in STEM subjects, and examples might be creative poetry, creative writing, poetry, 2D and 3D artwork, and dance, drama, and music. I'm going to look at briefly at the STEAM curriculum and some examples of interdisciplinary collaboration, and I'd like to look at some examples of the arts methods, particularly from the drama point of view. Now, this is a model which is down to an American group which call themselves steam.edu or steamedu.com in the US, and Georgette Yakman is the author of this model. It came out around about 20 years ago or so. And what she does here and the STEAM group is to compare where we are with siloed education, which is still the dominant mode really in the way in which education is organized into science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and arts. And you can see it has defined content here in terms of the sorts of things that would be taught. We have STEM, which was really an attempt to try and build together some sort of linking between science, technology, engineering, and maths, but arts always remained alone. However, a lot of this STEM integration was actually at the policy level. It never really got to underpin a true integration of these different subjects. They tended to still exist as silos. What STEAM envisages is lifelong holistic learning where all these come together in terms of looking at a particular problem. So what I'm going to do is give you an example here from my own work in South Africa. I do a lot of work in African countries, mainly in South Africa. So let's imagine here that some children are walking with their friends and they find a rock with some paintings on it, and they take a photo with your phone, and someone down the road says, well, these could be paintings made by the San people, and the San people lived in Southern Africa from about 40,000 years ago, and some of those tribes still exist, who lived many years ago. Your school suggests you do some research to find the age and significance of the paintings. You're asked to communicate your findings to the local community. So this is what's called a transdisciplinary or real-world problem solving, and it requires problem solving, planning, research skills. It requires multidisciplinary learning from the different traditionally siloed subjects. It's situated in the local community quite clearly, and it draws on understanding of what we call indigenous knowledge systems. So that kind of knowledge which has existed amongst indigenous peoples for many thousands of years. It draws on science because the students assess the nature of pigments used in paintings. They look at rock types and structure. They look at the effects of climate change and weather over time since those paintings were made. And they would look at the mathematics of carbon dating to establish the age of these paintings, the interpretation of data, and they would look at time frames for changes. In the arts, they would look at arts communication, how cave and rock paintings communicate and what they're communicating. They'd look at the color, form, and imaging in the arts, and they would probably create their own artwork actually on rock or on solid objects. And the cultural features and significance of different types of rock paintings would come in here, so the indigenous knowledge. And in technology, using ICTs and design, they could research and select relevant information. They could look at reports on ancient and modern design aspects of paintings on solid surfaces. And we look at murals, for example, which are another example of painting on a solid surface, design and methods of presentation to the community. So they would actually present their results to the community using art as well, and possibly poetry and drama and dance as well. And there are problem-solving outcomes which are about the skills of research and analysis, interactional, collaborative skills, how they create skills in connecting and selecting information and communicating that. So STEAM is very much about collaboration and about group working and interaction. It's far more likely to stimulate that than working within the silos. At the pedagogical level, I've been involved in 3 projects. The first was when many teachers and educators came to me and said, well, look, it's all very well talking about the way in which drama might stimulate science learning. Can you give us some examples? So we got together with a dozen or so science educators, and we produced a book of activities, which we call Performing Science in Teaching Chemistry, Physics and Biology through Drama. And then I worked with 21 other Darwin scholars. I'm a great Darwin enthusiast. And we produced a book which was partly in collaboration with the Linnaean Society, where Darwin produced his work, providing inspirational and innovative ways to learn through Darwin's life and work. And I produced some activities using drama. And then more recently, last year, this was published, a creative volume exploring the urgent importance of engaging learners with climate crisis and environmental education through using the language arts. And I'll give you references to these later on. Here's an example from the Darwin book. Now, this is interesting because this actually came out of an English literature lesson where the pupils were looking at examples of the letters. Darwin wrote and received over 3,000 letters, and every single letter that he wrote and received has been transcribed. The originals have been photocopied. They're all on a website, freely available, and they've been transcribed into text as well. So they're searchable, they're researchable. There have been many researchers looking at these. I've done some work myself on his relationship to the arts. And here, what they were doing was they were looking at Darwin's letters about insectivorous plants, which he liked to collect. And they're designing their own insectivorous plant, a sort of super insectivorous plant. And you can see their very expressive writing as well as the artwork to create. So it's a sort of language arts exercise, drawing on science. I like this one. This is a three-dimensional cake. It's a cake that is showing the parts of a plant cell. I don't know what it would be like to eat, but it's a very nice representation. There was a lecture given at Stanford a few years ago by Bob Horn, and he was saying that visualization can convey very complex ideas, and it's almost as if visualization helps learners to see answers to problems, and it produces an alternative to the usual STEM narratives, which are very densely technologically hard language sometimes for learners to understand. And so visualization is a very good way of getting through ideas. There's a special role for drama in STEAM, and I think that's because both dramatists and scientists are fascinated with phenomena, and they want to provide metaphoric explanatory responses. I like this quote from Fels and Mayer writing some years ago about the question, what if, prods scientists and dramatists towards creative exploration and interpretation of experiential sensual worlds, real and imagined. So in a way, the scientists and dramatists are not so far apart as some people would suggest, and that's why I say the great divide can be crossed. And in science teaching, we can use quite a wide range of art modes, from drama in theatre, scripted and improvised plays about science, role plays about scientific processes and events. We can simulate physical role plays and look at how they are analogous to the concepts. I'll show you an example in a minute. And we use mime and dance as well. It's the enjoyment, the enthusiasm, the cultural connection, but also meaningful in terms of learning science. So drama helps students learn about concepts, about how science works, the nature of science, how it works in society, and those three areas. And here's an example from the performing science book that we wrote. You might be able to work out what's going on here. Actually, you've got some children here carrying cards. That one says X, that one Y. There's another one around the corner with Y. These girls sitting in a circle here seem to be protecting somebody holding X and Y, and some more holding cards saying X on here. Now, what this is actually is the children were asked to simulate fertilization, the mixing of genetic information from sperm and egg. So here we've got a fertilized egg. XY would make it male. Here we have individual sperm carrying X chromosome and a Y chromosome, that one Y, and here the same. And these children actually, it's amazing how they did this. They are protecting the fertilized egg, so sperm, no more of these fellas here, these sperms here, can't get through. And so in one simple simulation, but it doesn't take very long to do, you've got a number of concepts that are being explored. Fertilization, mixing of genetic material, entry of sperm nucleus across the ovum membrane, genetic determination of gender, an oval wall forming a barrier to non-fertilizing sperm cells. So what about the future? Well, if we value the way in which arts can contribute to STEM learning, then we actually need to support and fight for the development and teaching of arts. Now, that seems a bit odd for me as a science educator to say, actually, we need the arts. But remember, I don't know what it's like in your countries, but in the UK, so many of our pupils do not continue to learn an art subject after the age of 14. They're allowed to drop this. They're not allowed to drop a science subject, but they are allowed to drop arts. And we've seen a denigration of arts. We've seen starvation of funding for arts in schools and arts in general. And I think that is really counterproductive. If we really want creative people in the future going to move things forward, we need to invest in arts. And we need to educate our teachers, science teachers and arts teachers, to show how these things can be embraced. And examples of arts pedagogy to teach sciences and high quality training, that's pre-service training of teachers and continuing professional development after they're actually in practice. And I've invested a lot of time in doing that. And we need more research into the benefits and practices of arts-based pedagogies, including to general cognitive ability and critical thinking. And I'm actually editing a version of the African Journal of Research in Math, Science and Technology Education at the moment, where we've got papers coming in which are showing how these things can actually result in better learning. I just want to finish by showing you, a model. Now, this is a model that my collaborator Michael Rice and I came up with some years ago, and we've developed it further to show how the arts comes into it. Now, doing science has changed very dramatically from classic 19th, 20th century science, knowledge growing from theories tested by specialists mainly through experimentation, to expansion of theories drawing on a wide range of inputs, experiences and technologies. And if we add STEAM, the art and creativity, then we got the possibility of those new dimensions being much more likely. At the same time, although science has changed, transmission learning, and we know more that transmission learning doesn't work and that constructivist learning is a much better paradigm of teaching because it helps embed a true understanding. And our model really is showing that school science hasn't really changed very much from the start of the 20th century into the 21st century in 100 years or so. Well, it's changed a little bit, but not much. Whereas science, the first line here, these influences are diverging science, pushing it into an evolution, whereas school science is flatlining. And we think that these new pedagogies from the arts will help push science education, STEM learning in more productive directions by making it more authentic and engaging, by incorporating some of the approaches that I've discussed with you. And that model we produced in a paper, which I think Peter has looked at, which is in the Canadian Journal, which we published a few years ago. Okay, that's a selected bibliography of things that I thought might be relevant to this particular talk. So, you know, you can have a printout of that later on. I assume that we give these slides to somebody who can then draw on these things. And perhaps I'll finish with this quote. E.O. Wilson's book about the consilience of science, produced just at the end of the 90s, I love. And he said, both the known and the unknown, the two worlds of our ancestors, nourish the human spirit. Their muses, science and the arts, whisper, follow us, explore and find out. And if you want to find out more, then you'll find most of my publications, apart from some of the chapters and books that are under copyright, are on ResearchGate or academia.edu, these repositories, or you can always contact me at the University of York. There's my email address. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you got something out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's really a very interesting lecture. I'm sorry for the first interference, so we are a bit late with the discussion, but still I think there will be questions for both of you, because really the lectures were very inspiring and the floor is open for discussion. First Klaus.
Yeah, it must not be that I'm the first, but I have only a short question to Verica. I'm not so much afraid that in the near future lawyers will be replaced by AI and robots. But I think there is a realistic concern that in the near future, even nowadays, ChatGPT, for example, is so much specialized in questions of law that our lawyers and our judges, who feel under pressure because of their deadlines for decisions, that they will rely on the advices of these technologies, because nowadays they are concentrated with all kinds of knowledge in the world of law. By the way, the same is true for physicians nowadays, practitioners. And that, I think, is a real problem and perhaps even a danger. And the second speaker, my only comment is thank you so much. You have so a long experience and bring your engagement and ideas in our academy. Thank you.
Klaus, thank you. Now Andrew was the second to raise hand.
Thank you. Wonderful presentations. I have so many questions, but I will just give one and to Professor Trstenjak that an aspect of the AI and law interaction or privacy interaction is really that whenever somebody makes an AI-based search, then AI actually captures what was searched. So if I ask about, let's say, prostate cancer and depression several times, then they kind of start suspecting and using it for kind of labeling me and also channeling some commercial interests or even nefarious interests because they know something about me. So how do you deal with that kind of danger? And certainly the advice that I'm hearing is that never enter anything that is confidential.
Thank you for the question. Verica, please answer. Or it was just a comment, maybe.
No,
it was a question.
It was a question, yeah. Also the first one, yeah. Yeah, concerning the question of cloud, can you see me and hear me? Okay, yeah. Okay. Concerning the question of Klaus, yeah, this is the reality because, lawyers firm, they use already a lot of, I don't know, I cannot say in the percentages, but maybe 30 to 40% with the help of the artificial intelligence to preparing an appeal or so on. But only and also the judges. So that there are few problems. The first problem is for the courts, for the judges, but also for the lawyers, the practical lawyers, that they have to have always closed system, so that there are many. For example, Legora, it's one important company for lawyers because they give you the closed system, because ChatGPT it's not the closed system, and you cannot put the contract, for example, with somebody where are two persons into ChatGPT and to say, could you correct me this? Could you improve this so that my rights are better protected and so on? So that this is all possible already, but concerning open system like ChatGPT, it's a problem with data protections and some others. And for example, especially judges for the courts, the biggest problems, the biggest, but I can say maybe problems, is going to be that we are going to use artificial intelligence, as I said, for I call these technical questions, but are not only technical questions. For example, today, if the court has to decide about the, execution in very similar enforcement procedure, in not very complicated cases. For example, if there is an enforcement on your salary, I don't know, 10% of salary because of something. This is very technical, you know, but if we have the problems where you have to decide about what is fair and about proportionality, for example, I haven't mentioned proportionality today, then this we cannot leave this to the artificial intelligence. Yeah, so that Klaus, you are right. The many areas in law with lawyers we will use we will use artificial intelligence, but for the final decisions and interpretations, for example, in judgment, we need human beings. And for example, this actually data protection, but Andre Balas asked, the problem, this is the real problem. And this is also the reason that we, in Europe, we have so many legal acts concerning the data protection. I don't know, in United States it's different, but in United States it's also the court system completely different, so that if there is a violation, the court can decide. And this judgment, then it's a precedent, and you don't need the laws in all areas, as we do have this in Europe. And there are very strict rules what the the enterprises can collect, and you have also the possibilities, you know, to agree with the cookies. If you don't agree, then you have to pay. For example, I don't know, if you would like to also to read the newspaper, you have the possibilities to read this, like how to say, this gratis, not to pay, or to pay €4 per day or per month, I don't know, and then you will not get cookies. And this also, I am not an expert for IT. This is then also connected with this. If I hope that they don't collect the data about the informations which you, which you collect, and what do you read, you know, because if you read something also in the newspapers about, I don't know, if you click on the article about, as you said before, I don't know, about the holidays in Greece, you will get then advertising in the next 2 hours about Greece, and I don't know, about feta cheese and so on. So, thank you.
Thank you. Now it's Dr. Boštjan Turk and then Peter. I don't like to comment something you mentioned also about money, and I think that all protection rules are okay, but it's hard to exercise them, because if you go to the court, only people that can finance that will go to the court. Now, Boštjan.
Yes, thank you very much to both participants, panelists for excellent presentation. I would like to make a question. It would be, how to say, the provocative one, but provocative one in the sense that I'm addressing one of the most respected legal experts we have in our academy, and in general, Verica Trstenjak. In her presentation, there was story of Solomon and of Solomon's judgment as it has been presented as a plausible case of an actual legal decision. But I'm asking really whether that's really a plausible case of an actual legal decision, because the part of the Bible, and I'm not, how to say, challenging the authority of the Bible, but the part of the Bible telling this story of the woman and King Solomon is not, how to say, the essential part in the sense that it would relate something about human being and God. It's how to say, an actual anecdote with the specific literal connotation. And how, because it's very known and it's part of our cultural heritage in the West, how could we define more precisely this story of Solomon as an actual legal decision? If it is possible, it's not possible.
Could you repeat what was this the last part of the sentence? If it's possible
yes,
or not possible?
It's possible. It's possible to define the story of Solomon and two women as an actual legal decision, or it stays on the level of, how to say, biblical narrative, allegorical story, and so on. Because it's no relation to God, there's no relation to human to God. It's sort of story, anecdote happened to prove because it's, how to say, part of proving the Solomon's wisdom. Because I think it was the first time he appeared. He was elected as a king and appeared in front of his people. So it is a real, actual legal decision, or just a little story from the Bible.
Yeah, it's very good comment. Actually, you are right, because it was also not realized as a legal decision. But it is actually, I would say, no, also according to your comment, that this is a combination of legal decision, but also about, how to say, humanism and human beings' empathies and so on. And this is also something what a lawyer needs, you know.
Yes,
So
yes.
not judge, especially judge, because you have to distinguish, because was the judge decide this is the final, you know. If there is a civil servant at the ministry, there is still the control at the court. If there is, I don't know, a lawyer in the bank, it's still a control, but the judge, it's the final decision. And there should be not only to respect only the law, but also this what is more than law. We call this the natural law. And natural law, this is fairness, this is humanism, you know, this is all this what is moral ethics. This is what is more than law.
Yes.
Okay, now we come to Peter and then Barry.
Yeah, one question that is actually directed to both of you. It is putting things into practice. In the area of arts and science teaching, artificial intelligence is used more and more. So we have another trend, actually, that it makes it more difficult to put this integrated approach into practice. The other thing is, in law, we have actually the tendency that more and more cases are actually brought to court or to solicitors by using artificial intelligence, because everybody thinks he has expertise or she has expertise and says, I can send it out. So this is a problem. And then the other problem is, you quoted the case against Schufa. It is not solely used by this ranking by Schufa, but not solely means as well. And then my question would be actually, or one of my questions, who is then deciding? And it's one thing is information, protection of information, that's the data protection law. But the other thing is connection and combination of information. And I think this is an area that is largely not observed, not considered. And then I come to the criteria. I've simply a comment actually linked to these points. You mentioned the 10 criteria of a good mother and a good father. Good mother was just catchwords, keywords. And you always, I think it had been in all cases, the 10 criteria had been at least 2 lines for the fathers. It's simply an observation. I find interesting what is going on there in terms of judgment by artificial intelligence.
Okay, well, looking for answers.
Yeah, actually, I think it was more also comment concerning these cases, automated decision makings. Who is going to decide at the end? Just not to go in the details. At the end, is the human being who has to decide. This is what the European legislator would like to say, to prevent that the algorithms they will decide. How to say, without the supervision of the human beings. As I said, in the banks, they said, but also the human being could be responsible for discrimination. you know. But anyway, if there is a human being at the end who has to confirm this credit, you know, and to sign this, it's the responsibility then by this person, and this person also has a boss, and boss has to control this, and then so on. And so that there is like structure here. Né? In the artificial intelligence, we don't have at the moment such development.
I think Martin would like to.
What was the second part? It was also a question, or it was, I know it was about these 10 qualities. Yeah, but this is also because I always ask 10, give me 10 answer in 10 points, because I don't like these long essays, you know. And as I said, I don't know why the answers for father are longer, but for me it was very interesting that for example, the same criteria like empathy was by mother on the 4th position and by father on the 8th position. But I think that empathy is also very important for children. That, like I would say, like you know.
Barry was next. Barry was next, but I think that Martin would like to give some answers because you raised the hand. And Martin, please, do you have?
Yeah.
An answer?
I mean, Peter raised the point about whether AI might make integration between arts and sciences less likely, but I don't see it. I don't see why that would necessarily happen. One thing I do think is very important in terms of AI and information in general that's being generated is teaching pupils. And I think this is probably one of the most important things we should address in schooling, is to give our learners a sense of critical literacy. That is a literacy that can challenge and look at information from the point of its veracity, its truth, as to whether this is grounded in reliable information or whether it's images that are produced by AI, for example, which are completely false. And we're seeing more and more of these things happen in the news and in our society. I first came across this during the COVID pandemic, when so much misinformation was being put around that I was moved to write an article which was calling for critical literacy. And I used the pandemic as an example of how interrogation should really come through. And a lot of people have written about IT literacy, but it's become much more pertinent now with the use of AI, and particularly in social media. And it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous indeed. And I think really we have to look at a generation who are, you know, educated in being able to critique what's going on around them and what they see and what they read.
Thank you very much. We are quite over time, but the discussion is very interesting. And I think that now we will first let Barry and then Tassos to ask questions and to get responses. And I think that then we will have to close the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dušan. So actually I have questions for both, but maybe I ask Verica first. Because I think it's really important you have this topic for in scientific part, for example, nowadays when we publish in something, right? So the article asks us to make sure that if you use AI to polish in, you know, you have to decline. So for example, in law field, does it also like this, or in the future, for example, the lawyer or the judge, if they use AI to make the case, is it also need to be declined this or not?
For the law, I think for the students, yeah, it's necessary that they say this, or some professors also, some professors even don't allow this to use the artificial intelligence, but it's difficult to prove, but you have to say if you have used it or not. But for the judges and I think with legal practitioners in the legal firms, they use it, and actually for the court, it's not, I think for the court, you know, if you are practicing lawyer and you go to the court with your appeal, for example, you know, then for the court it's not important, because they know the cases where only artificial intelligence finished the how to say, for example, the appeal, to write an appeal and so on. But for the judges, they can use it, but I said just to as help, you know, to look for the, I don't know, for example, to look for case law, for the older case law, or to prepare which legal acts are important in this case, about the amendments of the law. But actually, I don't know if the judge would now finish, actually, how to say, in the case that the judge would finish the judgment only with artificial intelligence. I think it's difficult to control at the moment, but actually it's not allowed. But we had cases, I don't know if you're familiar with, for example, in the United States, there was one appeal also made by the artificial intelligence. And there was, you know, because every case has a number. At the European Court of Justice, you have CDC 225, for example, and in the United States, in different, every court has different system. And then one practicing lawyer, he quoted different cases, and this was, how to say, like hallucination of the artificial intelligence. This was actually, this practicing lawyer quoted non-existing cases. And he got from the court very high penalty, very high penalty. I have forgotten now how many, but $100,000 US dollars or something like this. Because if you always also say to the students, if you use artificial intelligence as a help, then you have to be better than artificial intelligence to check, to correct and to check if the answer is correct. For example, just to say for the law, we have two courts in Europe. One is court where I was, a court of justice, which is the constitutional court and so on. And then we have the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which is, it's only for human rights, you know. It's not the general court, like for competition cases and so on, or for infringement procedures. And at the beginning, ChatGPT, how to say, was not able to distinguish between two cases. And all the answers were not correct. And now ChatGPT improved, really, has improved a lot. And the answers are much better. It's still not completely correct in all cases. But if you would ask, for example, for the case Schufa Holding, you will get the information, you know, but general one. So that this is the answer. This would be my answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also have a question for Martin, because I think during your presentation, it's really coming to my mind. So before, I think people need long time to learn art or practice, but nowadays use AI, whatever, you can generate nice pictures in few seconds, right? So therefore, I'm thinking about in the future, is art really could be taught or not, and in particularly, for example, for the children. So concerning about to give them the concept to combine art and science, what would you think might be the promising, you know, strategies, in particularly for the children education concerning about combine art and science aspect?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things really is the education of teachers. It's teachers who have to operate these sort of things. And if we believe that art and science can come together for the benefit of both, really, and we have to remember the art outcomes are just as important as the science outcomes, because sometimes science teachers would say, okay, well, we'll use drama, we'll use poetry, we'll use narrative forms, and we'll borrow those art things. But we're not interested in the art outcomes. We're only interested in our subject, our science. So we have to break down those barriers that that have been created through the silos, because we've all been educated within those silos. I mean, I was educated in zoology and geology, but not in the arts. And so when I come to my teaching and somebody says, oh, well, you could use drama, you could use painting, I say, well, yeah, it's nothing to do with me. Just send them to the art department and they can do those things. And so we have to break down the barriers in teacher education and in professional development. That's not an easy thing to do, because we have to go against sort of generations, really, of this kind of siloization of the subject, splitting them up into these things and breaking down these barriers. So the more that we can show the power of the art to affect the science and the science to contribute to the art, the better. And I remember talking to one pupil about this and saying, well, you know, you've done this drama simulation, and it was about understanding the relationship between the moon and the planets and the Earth. And I said, but you could have seen all that on a video. You could have seen it on an AI simulation, if you like, or you could have seen it in a book, and it would have been much quicker because you could have just seen that there in the pictures. And you know what he said? He said, yeah, but I can remember it better because of what I did to dramatize it. And I had this vision that somehow he would be sitting in an examination in a few years' time going like this and, you know, imagining the waves and acting it out again. And so there'd be one pupil sitting in the corner of the examination hall trying to act out with his hands to remember that thing. But it's kind of the cognitive connections that art can make in the mind, which is the power. That's the real thing that we've got to try and get over to teachers to try and then establish breaking these barriers down. So thank you very much for your question. Yeah.
Thank you. And now Tassos. We don't hear you. You should turn your microphone on.
You're right. I'm very modest. So I'm open up. I would simply like to say I don't have a question to ask to the two speakers. I learned a lot from their speeches, but I want to say something about education. I think that we have lost the game. Once we begin at the end of the primary school or in high school or later in lyceum, we have lost the game. There is a very, very important time that we have to start, and this is elementary. The children must learn how to use their hands to write. They must learn from very early age that writing is not a matter of pushing buttons to write down a sentence. And then painting or doing a thing of art is not a matter of combining features you find on the tube or in the computer. It's a matter of your hands being involved in creating something. You build something, and you remember as children, we were so proud when we made a little stack in the classroom, and the teacher said, wow, this is a very beautiful thing you built. Or we write our name and the name of our teacher, and they look at it and say, oh, good, those nice letters. I see how you write your name. Who does this today? In all countries in Europe, I believe, the same problem is the child loses the touch with their own body, with their own hand. They simply use their hand as a medium to produce something from a machine by pushing buttons and in order to get music or to get pictures or to see anything from on a screen. So we are losing this in education, and it has to start very early. I have written a paper, actually, with Yanis Liridis asked me, and I thought it was a good idea. I had a paper written just for the EASA publications for the academy. And I wrote that paper about education, and today, I think you will, if you do me the honor of looking it up and reading, you may see some of the ideas that I lay out there in detail. What does it mean, mathematics? When I go to high schools and here I say, if I add 1 to 1/2, to 1/3, to 1/4, to 1/5, do you know what I will get? No, the answer is no computer will tell you what you will get. You will always think you're reaching some number if you add all these numbers up, and there is no number you're reaching. You're going to infinity. How will you ask the child to understand that? So I believe that, in closing, instead of looking higher up in education to come up with fancy projects and combining countries and all this, we should all start looking at the earliest years of education. Can we interfere there? Introduce some ideas that will be put in practice? Then we have a hope. Otherwise, our children will not know how to use their hands to paint or to write. They will think everything is a matter of pushing buttons and controlling colors.
You're absolutely right.
That's all.
No, we came to the end. Maybe since we have Barry from China, I have some reference. You know, in AI, we always say human empathy, human mind prevail. But there's something in the history. It's not about losing of empathy, but just saying what do we need? Do we need empathy? And the abacus from China, it was transferred to Japan. That's what I learned. And in China, they had some points where they could play. When they were computing, they also played. When this abacus came to Japan, they said, "Oh, this part is not important. We only need calculus." And maybe the same will come with AI. We don't need empathy. That's a huge problem. What is useful? And as long as what is useful will prevail and what is important, we are in the problem. I'm sorry that I used a few words for the end. It was really very interesting. Next time we'll have to pay more attention to how things work, to be on time. And I really apologize for the fact that we have no control over other people that have microphones on. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dušan. Thank you. Very good. Very interesting. Thank you.
Bye-bye.